Hey guys, Ryan here. In today's video, I'm going to be going over what I think are the best assault rifles to use in all of Warzone, and I'm going to be breaking it up into two different categories. One's going to be a focus on the mid-range to long range, and I'm going to be ranking the top 5 ARs for that, and then I'm going to be breaking down the top 3 ARs for the close range and that kind of sniper support-ish AR type class. Now, guys, you can go down below to see all of the attachments. It's going to be in the comments and descriptions, and then you can use the timestamps to skip around and go to the parts that you want to see personally. You don't have to like, you don't have to subscribe, but if you do, I really appreciate it, and it really helps the channel, especially for a small channel like me, and that little bit of interaction can help push this video to other people. But let's get into it, guys. So first up, I'm just going to be listing the top 5 long-range ARs I believe in the game right now, and that's going to be the FARA and C58 are at the top. The Stoner LMG, I know it's not really an AR, but I'm just going to consider it one just as an LMG. And then it's going to be the Cold War AK and the XM4, and I'm going to have a couple honorable mentions after that. But let's start at the top, and that's going to be the number 1 and 2 spots, and those belong to the FARA and C58, and they're a little bit interchangeable because it's going to come down to personal preference. Which one do you feel more comfortable with? Some people find that the recoil on the C58 is just a little too much for them, and for those people, I'd really recommend just sticking with the FARA because it has low recoil, as a high rate of fire, so that means if you miss 1 or 2 shots, it's not going to drastically affect your time to kill. And that's something the C58 kind of has working against it. It does have a little bit higher recoil. It's not too crazy. It's very manageable. People like Iceman Isaac definitely believe it's a little bit better than the FARA just based on your comfort level. But it has a little higher recoil and it has a slower rate of fire. So if you miss 1 or 2 shots because of that higher recoil, it can have a big effect on your time to kill. And also, if you were to, let's say, for example, in a gunfight, only hit extremities or lower stomach, then the FARA will come out on top. But that's something that I don't really like to necessarily put in favor of the FARA, because I think you should always strive to be hitting headshots and or chest shots, because that's going to really affect your time to kill and help you win more gunfights. So just to quickly wrap up, between the FARA and C58, both are really good right now, and I really recommend just running what you feel more comfortable with, what you have a more personal preference towards. Don't sleep on the C58 though. That gun is insane, and I know a lot of people don't even have it really leveled up, but it is worth to level up. I promise you that. But now, guys, I want to get on to the third one, which I actually think could be better than these guns in certain situations. I just don't think a lot of people vibe with the LMGs, and that's going to be the Stoner. I'm going to have a video coming out very soon describing in way more detail, but essentially, statistically and feel-wise, the Stoner feels like a mixture between the C58 and FARA, and stat-wise, it dominates and destroys against so many guns, and you would be absolutely blown away seeing the power and potential this thing has. I'm not going to pull it up here because I want to save it for that video, and I really mean it, guys, though. This thing is being slept on, and I know it's an LMG, and people don't like the sluggish feel of it, and they're sometimes worried about the reload time. I can promise you guys that's really not that big of a concern, and it's really worth using. This gun has high damage. The only real weakness that it's really going to have is it's going to have slightly higher recoil, but it's really in between the FARA and the C58, and the recoil is so easily manageable if you run the new Task Force barrel, because it just makes this thing kind of a laser beam, and the damage is so high, so you're just able to melt kids at pretty much all ranges. Of course, some people are going to find the recoil maybe a little too much for them, because it's not as easy as, let's say, the FARA or Krig, but it's not that bad. I just really recommend giving it a try, because I think tons of people are going to be surprised by it, and I really think it might be better than the FARA and C58. Now, guys, let's move on to the final two that I'm going to be going over. I'm going to be talking about them together because it's the XM4 and Cold War AK, and they're used very similarly to the way you'd use the old AMAX, and that's so you want to mainly target gunfights within 30 to 75 meters, even closer, but beyond that, the recoil may make it a little too hard if they're in good cover or just whatever. It's something that you mainly want to use in the mid-range, not so much the long range, but it has potential to be used at all ranges. And the main way that you guys want to build this, obviously, is just going to be with the long barrel, the GRU Suppressor, the Field Agent grip, or the Spetsnaz grip, I think it is on the AK, and then like the Axial 3 times. And that's going to be something that's going to be absolutely dominant in the mid-range for either of those guns, while still maintaining your capability and your ability to destroy kids in the close range, because the XM4 and Cold War AK also function very well as sniper supports. Of course, guys, as I mentioned before, they do have a little higher recoil, so it's just something you have to be aware of. That's their like kind of main drawback in comparison to all of these other guns I mentioned. They're not going to have as much use in the long range, but they're going to be a little bit more effective in the mid range. So as for now, honorable mentions, I just want to put in the Ram 7, the M4A1, the Krig, of course, and even the AMAX. All of these guns deserve their respect, and they all have a place they can be used. And there's actually a lot of other guns that are very viable, because this is the one season, or last season as well, where you are not forced to use the meta guns because they are so good that you're just at a massive disadvantage for not using them. Of course, some people can argue that the FARA is that good, but the C58, the Stoner, the Krig, all of these guns can compete with it in the long range, and there's so many guns that can compete with it in the mid range and even beat it in the mid range and close. And now that is going to be the way I'm going to transition into the close range ARs, because this is a whole different bunch, and I'm only going to be going over 3, and I will be mentioning a couple other honorable mentions, of course, but the top 3 are going to be the Cold War AK, the XM4, and then the AS Val. And I know that a lot of people probably aren't surprised by those ones, and they probably already understand why the XM4 Cold War AK are so good, so this part's going to be a little quicker, but I'm still going to break down every gun and why I think it's so good. So as for the Cold War AK, guys, in terms of raw time to kill, it's pretty much unmatched in its ability to compete with SMGs up close and the ability to beat almost every other AR in the mid-range. Seriously, guys, this thing is only bested by the AS Val up close in terms of ARs, and in the mid-range, there's almost no gun that beats this thing in raw time to kill. This thing is absolutely a menace, and if you can control the recoil, if you have a good feel for it, it is the perfect sniper support, and it can be used in almost any situation. Now, of course, some people find the recoil just too much for them and they don't like it. And for those people, that's where I really recommend the XM4, because the damage isn't as high, but because the recoil is so much easier to control, it feels a lot better in the mid-range for some people, and it feels almost just as good up close, and maybe it's a little bit better in the long range than the Cold War AK. But I do want to say one thing, guys. If you are playing solo or duos primarily, then I'm going to have to almost always recommend running the AS Val. Because simply, guys, the AS Val is unmatched in the close range. Between 0 and 15, 0 20 meters, there is no gun that has a higher time to kill other than the nail gun. But the nail gun only has 20 bullets, a lot slower rate of fire, and it's just not as good, I think. Now, I'm not saying the nail gun isn't good, because it does technically kill faster than the AS Val, but I would really just recommend using the AS Val over the nail gun, although both are absolutely viable. Now, what I do want to say, though, is the AS Val can be used in trios and quads, and I really believe in it, but a lot of people can't. It's just not something that really vibes with their playstyles. It's not something I'd really overall recommend, especially when the Cold War AK and XM4 exist. Now, if you want to know other guns that can be used kind of like this as ARs, I do actually think the SCAR is being really slept on in that way. The FFAR and Groza can be used like that, but they're not as effective. I think that the Ram 7, of course, will always fill that role very well. So there's a couple other guns you can use in this role, but I'd really recommend kind of sticking with the Cold War AK and the XM4 at the moment, because they are just so dominant. And if you're in solo duos, please try out that AS Val. I have a couple other videos on it on my channel you can check out, because that thing just dominates. So guys, I hope you liked this video. I hope it helps you find better ARs to use, and I hope that you overall get a better sense of the current AR meta. This is not all inclusive. There's a lot of guns I had to leave off for time purposes, because I don't want to make my videos too long. But there's just a lot that I had to leave off, so be aware of that. There's so many other guns that I was not able to mention here, and almost anything is viable, as I mentioned before. Once again, you don't have to like, you don't have to subscribe, but if you do, I appreciate it. I just also want to say thank you guys for watching this video. I appreciate all the support anyone has ever left on my channel, especially the support recently in the past like 2 or 3 months. It has been off the charts, and I just really want to say thank you to everyone. Have a good day, guys. It's been Ryan. Peace.